When Elena Vaughn's luxury Mercedes died on an empty roadside in the middle of nowhere, she thought it was just expensive metal failing at the worst possible time. What she didn't know was that the quiet man who stopped to help her in his beat-up pickup truck had designed the very technology that killed her car. And buried inside that technology was a hidden flaw capable of destroying her billion-dollar empire before she even knew it existed. This is the story of two people who saved each other without meaning to. If you want to see how this plays out, stick around until the end, hit that like button, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The rain came down like punishment. Elena Vaughn stood on the gravel shoulder of Route 9, staring at her Mercedes S-Class like it had personally betrayed her. Water soaked through her silk blouse. Her heels sank into the mud. The phone in her hand showed one bar of signal that kept flickering in and out like a dying heartbeat. She tried the ignition again. Nothing, not even a click. "Unbelievable," she said out loud to no one. 30 years old, CEO of Vaughn Automotive Technologies, worth somewhere north of $800 million, depending on which valuation model the investors were using that week. And she was stuck on the side of a road in rural New York, like some college kid whose Honda finally gave up. The irony wasn't lost on her. She built her company on smart vehicle software. Her engineers had spent years developing embedded intelligence systems that turned ordinary cars into connected, self-diagnosing machines. And here she was, stranded in one of those machines, completely helpless. She'd been driving back from a facility tour upstate when the dashboard lit up like a Christmas tree. Every warning light flashed at once. Then the engine cut out. No sputter, no warning, just dead. Elena had coasted to the shoulder, turned the key, and gotten absolutely nothing in response. That was 20 minutes ago. Now she stood in the rain, scrolling through her contacts, trying to figure out who to call. Her assistant was 3 hours away in Manhattan. Roadside assistants said they'd send someone within 90 minutes, which was corporate speak for good luck. And she absolutely was not calling anyone from the office, because the last thing she needed was her board members knowing their CEO couldn't even keep her own car running 2 weeks before the biggest acquisition deal in the company's history. A gust of wind hit her, and she shivered. This whole day had been a disaster from the start. The facility tour ran long. The engineers kept asking questions she didn't have time to answer. Her CFO kept texting her revised projections that made less sense every time she looked at them. And now this. She checked her phone again. The single bar was gone. Perfect. Headlights appeared in the distance, coming from the south. Elena stepped closer to the road, waving one hand, but the car blew past her without slowing down. Then another. Then a truck that sprayed dirty water across her legs as it passed. She was invisible out here. 10 more minutes went by. The rain got heavier. Her hair was plastered to her face. Her clothes were ruined, and the temperature was dropping fast. When the next set of headlights appeared, she didn't bother waving. People didn't stop anymore. Not for strangers. Not on roads like this. But the vehicle slowed. It was a pickup truck, old and blue, with rust around the wheel wells and a dent in the driver's side door. It pulled onto the shoulder about 20 feet ahead of her and stopped. Elena felt a flicker of relief, followed immediately by caution. She didn't know who was in that truck, didn't know what they wanted, but she also didn't have a lot of options. The driver's door opened and a man stepped out. He looked about her age, maybe a little older. Tall, lean, wearing jeans and a faded gray jacket. Dark hair, a little too long. He moved slowly, like someone who wasn't in a hurry, and walked toward her without saying anything. "Car trouble?" he asked when he got close enough. Elena nodded. "It just died. No warning." The man glanced at the Mercedes, then back at her. "You try calling someone? No signal." He pulled out his own phone, checked it, and shook his head. "Yeah. Dead zone out here. You're not getting help anytime soon." "Great. I can take a look if you want." Elena hesitated. She didn't know this guy, didn't know if he had any idea what he was doing. But standing in the rain wasn't solving anything. "Sure," she said. "Thanks." The man walked over to the Mercedes and opened the driver's door. He leaned in, turned the key, and listened. Nothing happened. He popped the hood and stepped around to the front of the car. Elena followed, wrapping her arms around herself against the cold. The man studied the engine for a moment, then reached in and checked a few connections. He didn't say anything, just worked quietly, methodically, like he'd done this 1,000 times before. "You know cars?" Elena asked. "Some." This isn't a regular car. I noticed. Well, he straightened up and walked back to his truck. A moment later, he returned with a small black device about the size of a phone. It had a screen and a couple of buttons, and it looked homemade. Duct tape held part of the casing together. Elena frowned. What is that? Diagnostic tool. He plugged it into a port under the dashboard, and the screen lit up with lines of code. Elena leaned in, trying to see what he was doing, but the text scrolled too fast. The man's expression didn't change. He just watched the screen, occasionally pressing a button, his face unreadable. Find anything? Elena asked. Yeah. What? Your gateway modules crashed. Elena blinked. What? The vehicle gateway. It's the main communication hub between all your subsystems. When it goes down, everything else shuts off. She stared at him. How do you know that? Because I'm looking at the error logs. No, I mean, how do you know what a vehicle gateway is? The man glanced at her, and for the first time, something like amusement flickered across his face. Lucky guess. He turned back to the device and pressed a few more buttons. The screen changed, showing what looked like a system reboot sequence. This isn't a permanent fix, he said, but it should get you running long enough to make it to the next town. Wait, you're rebooting the whole system? That's the idea. From a device you built yourself? Yeah. Elena didn't know whether to be impressed or concerned. That's not supposed to be possible. The gateway's locked down. You need proprietary access to even touch it. The man didn't respond. He just kept working. A minute later, the Mercedes' dashboard lit up. The engine turned over. The headlights came on. Elena stared at the car, then at the man. How did you do that? He unplugged the device and handed her the keys. Like I said, it's temporary. You'll want to get it checked out before you drive too far. Who are you? Lucas Bennett. And you just happen to carry around a custom diagnostic tool that can hack into a vehicle gateway? Lucas closed the hood and wiped his hands on his jeans. I wouldn't call it hacking. Then what would you call it? Fixing a design flaw. Elena felt something cold settle in her chest. What design flaw? Lucas looked at her for a long moment, and she could see him deciding whether or not to answer. The gateway protocol has a memory leak, he said finally. Under certain conditions, it can cascade into a full system failure. Cold rain, low temperatures, specific humidity levels. It's rare, but it happens. How do you know that? Because I helped write the protocol. Elena's pulse kicked up. You worked for Vaughn Automotive? A long time ago, before it was called that. When? 6 years. Maybe 7. She did the math in her head. That would have been right around the time the company was restructuring, back when it was still a mid-tier tech firm trying to break into the automotive market. Before the acquisition that turned it into a billion-dollar operation, before she became CEO. What's your name again? She asked. Lucas Bennett. The name didn't sound familiar, but that didn't mean anything. The company had gone through 3 leadership changes in those years. Half the original team had left or been laid off during restructuring. And you just walked away? Elena asked. Something like that. Why? Lucas glanced toward his truck, and for the first time, Elena noticed the small figure sitting in the passenger seat. A kid, maybe 8 or 9 years old. She was watching them through the window, her face pale and serious. I had other priorities, Lucas said quietly. Elena followed his gaze. That your daughter? Yes, She okay? She's fine, just tired. Lucas started walking back toward the truck, and Elena realized he was leaving. Wait, she said. He stopped. You said there's a design flaw in the gateway protocol. Yeah. How many vehicles are affected? Lucas didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was flat. If I had to guess, around 9,000. Elena felt the ground shift under her feet. 9,000. Give or take. And you knew about this. I filed a report before I left. Told them exactly what the problem was and how to fix it. What happened to the report? No idea. I assume it got buried during the restructuring. Elena's mind was racing. 9,000 vehicles. 9,000 potential failures. If even a fraction of them crashed the way hers just did, the lawsuits alone would destroy the company. And if the flaw became public right before the acquisition closed, she forced herself to stay calm. Why didn't you follow up? I tried. No one returned my calls. Eventually, I stopped trying. So you just left it alone? Lucas turned to face her fully, and his expression was colder than the rain. I didn't leave anything alone. I told the people who were supposed to fix it. They chose not to listen. That's not on me. But you knew people could get hurt. Yeah, I knew. And I also knew that if I kept pushing, I'd get blacklisted from the industry and lose the only income I had to take care of my daughter. So I made a choice. Elena didn't know what to say to that. Lucas walked back to his truck and opened the door. Get your car looked at soon. The reboot won't hold for long. Wait, Elena said again. He paused, one hand on the door. I need to talk to you about this, the flaw, the report, all of it. Why? Because if what you're saying is true, I need to fix it. Lucas studied her for a long moment. You're the CEO. Yeah. Then you should have fixed it 6 years ago. I wasn't the CEO 6 years ago. Not my problem. He started to climb into the truck, but Elena stepped forward. Please, just give me your contact information. Let me look into this. I don't want to be involved. You're already involved. You wrote the protocol. You know what's wrong with it. I need your help. Lucas looked at his daughter through the window, then back at Elena. I help you, and this turns into a legal mess. What happens to her? It won't. You don't know that. No. But I know that if I don't fix this and someone gets hurt, I'll never forgive myself, and I'm guessing you won't either. That landed. Lucas exhaled slowly, his breath visible in the cold air. He pulled a business card from his wallet and handed it to her. It was plain white, with just a phone number printed on it. No name, no company. That's my cell, he said. Don't call unless you're serious. I'm serious. He climbed into the truck, started the engine, and drove off without another word. Elena stood there in the rain, staring at the card in her hand. 9,000 vehicles. A hidden flaw. A whistleblower who walked away. And $1 billion acquisition hanging in the balance. She got into the Mercedes, turned the key, and felt the engine rumble to life. The dashboard looked normal. Everything seemed fine, but she knew it wasn't. She pulled onto the road and started driving south, her mind already running through scenarios. If Lucas was telling the truth, she had a massive problem. If he wasn't, she just wasted 20 minutes in the rain talking to a stranger with a homemade diagnostic tool. But something about the way he'd looked at her told her he wasn't lying. He knew the system. He knew the flaw. And he'd tried to warn someone. Elena's phone buzzed. Signal was back. She glanced at the screen and saw a dozen missed calls from her CFO, her assistant, and 2 board members. There were emails flagged urgent, texts asking where she was. She ignored all of them. Instead, she pulled over, opened her contacts, and entered Lucas Bennett's number. She didn't call. Not yet. But she saved it. Because if what he said was true, Lucas Bennett might be the only person who could save her company, or destroy it. By the time Elena made it back to Manhattan, it was almost midnight. The rain had followed her all the way down, turning the city streets slick and black. She parked in the underground garage beneath her building and sat in the car for a moment, staring at the dashboard. Everything looked fine, but she couldn't stop thinking about what Lucas had said. A memory leak, a cascade failure, 9,000 vehicles. She grabbed her bag and headed upstairs. Her apartment was on the 40th floor, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. It was beautiful in the way expensive things were beautiful. Cold, clean, untouchable. She'd bought it 3 years ago, right after the company went public. It was supposed to feel like success. Most nights it just felt empty. Elena kicked off her ruined heels, dropped her bag on the kitchen counter, and poured herself a glass of wine. Then she opened her laptop and started searching. Lucas Bennett. The name pulled up a handful of LinkedIn profiles, none of them recent. A few mentions in old tech forums. A GitHub account that hadn't been updated in years. She dug deeper. There. A staff directory from 2018 archived on an old version of the company website. Lucas Bennett, Senior Systems Engineer. No photo? No details. She kept searching. An obituary from 2019. Sarah Bennett, 29, lost her battle with cancer. Survived by her husband, Lucas, and daughter, Sophie. Elena stared at the screen. That was why he left. She closed the laptop and leaned back against the couch, the wine glass cold in her hand. Lucas hadn't walked away because he didn't care. He'd walked away because he didn't have a choice. And now he was living somewhere upstate, driving a beat-up truck, raising his daughter alone. While she was here, running the company he'd helped build, making decisions about technology he'd designed. It didn't sit right. Elena pulled out her phone and opened her messages. She started typing. "This is Elena Vaughn. We spoke earlier tonight. I looked into what you told me, and I think we need to talk. Can we set up a call?" She stared at the message for a long time before hitting send. The response came faster than she expected. "Tomorrow. 8 a.m. I'll call you." Elena set the phone down and finished her wine. Tomorrow, she'd find out if Lucas Bennett was telling the truth. And if he was, she'd have to figure out what the hell to do about it. Shamuk. The call came at exactly 8 o'clock. Elena was already at her desk, coffee in hand, laptop open. She'd been up since 5, running through every piece of documentation she could find on the Gateway Protocol. Most of it was technical jargon she only half understood, but the architecture was clear enough. The Gateway was the brain of the entire system. If it failed, everything else went down with it. Her phone buzzed. She answered. "Lucas? Yeah. Sam." His voice sounded the same as it had last night, calm, detached, like he was talking about the weather. "Thanks for calling," Elena said. "You said you looked into it." "I did. I found your name in an old staff directory, and I found the obituary for your wife. I'm sorry." There was a pause. "That's not why I left." "I know, but it didn't help." "No, it didn't." Elena took a breath. "I need to know more about the flaw. What causes it, how widespread it is, and why no one caught it before now. You want the technical version or the version that won't put you to sleep?" "Technical. I can handle it." Lucas started talking and Elena listened. The flaw was buried deep inside the Gateway's memory allocation system. Under normal conditions, the system ran fine. But when specific environmental variables aligned, temperature below 40 degrees, humidity above 70%, rapid voltage fluctuations from the battery, the Gateway's error handling protocol would misfire. Instead of clearing the error, it would loop, consuming memory until the entire system locked up. It was the kind of bug that would never show up in lab testing. It only happened in the real world, under real conditions. And once it happened, the car was dead. "How many failures have been reported?" Elena asked. "Officially, maybe a dozen. But most people don't report Gateway failures. They just assume the car's broken and take it to a dealer. And the dealer fixes it without logging the root cause." "Exactly." Elena rubbed her temples. "So we have no idea how many times this has actually happened." "No. But based on the conditions required, I'd estimate maybe 50 to 100 incidents over the past 3 years. That's not nothing." "No, it's not." Elena stared at her notes. "You said you filed a report." "Yeah, 6 years ago, right before I left." "Do you have a copy?" "No, I submitted it through the internal system. I assume it's still in there somewhere." "I'll find it." "Good luck." Half the documentation from that era got wiped during the migration to the new database. Elena made a note. "If I can't find it, can you recreate it?" Lucas was quiet for a moment. "Why would I do that?" "Because you're the only person who understands this system well enough to fix it. I don't work for you. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to help me make sure no one else gets stranded on the side of the road. That's not my responsibility anymore." Some goods. "Maybe not. But you're the one who stopped to help me last night, so clearly you still care." Lucas didn't respond. Elena pressed on. "Look, I'm not trying to drag you back into something you walked away from, but if this flaw is as serious as you say it is, I need to fix it, and I can't do that without you." "Why not? You've got a whole team of engineers." "None of them designed the system. You did." "I was part of a team, and the rest of that team is gone." Another pause. "What do you want from me?" Lucas asked finally. "Help me understand the flaw. Help me design a fix. And help me figure out how to deploy it without causing a panic. That's a lot." "I know. And if I say no?" Elena hesitated. She could lie. She could tell him she'd figure it out on her own. But something told her Lucas would see right through that. If you say no, I'll do my best. But people might get hurt, and you'll know you could have stopped it. Lucas exhaled slowly. That's a hell of a thing to say. It's the truth. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Then Lucas said, I'll help, but I'm doing this remotely. I'm not coming to New York. I'm not sitting in meetings, and I'm not signing anything that puts my name on this. Deal. And if this turns into a legal mess, I'm out. Understood. One more thing. What? My daughter comes first. If she needs me, I'm gone. No explanations, no apologies. Elena thought about the little girl she'd seen in the truck. Pale face, serious eyes. I get it. Good. When can we start? Send me the documentation. I'll take a look and get back to you. Elena pulled up her email and started attaching files. Sending it now. Got it. Lucas? Yeah? Thank you. He hung up without responding. Elena set the phone down and stared at her screen. She'd just hired a ghost. A man who didn't exist in any of the company's current records. A man who'd walked away from the industry 6 years ago and never looked back. And now he was the only thing standing between her company and a potential disaster. She picked up her coffee and took a long drink. This was going to get complicated. The documentation arrived in Lucas's inbox at 8:47 a.m., 20 minutes after he hung up with Elena. He was sitting at the kitchen table in his small house outside Albany, Sophie across from him finishing her cereal before school. Who were you talking to? Sophie asked without looking up. Work stuff. You don't have work. I have consulting work. Sophie glanced at him, her dark eyes skeptical. She was too smart for 8 years old, always had been. Is it the car lady? Lucas frowned. How do you know about that? I saw her last night. She looked cold. She was. Did you help her? Yeah. Sophie went back to her cereal. Good. Lucas opened his laptop and started scrolling through the files Elena had sent. There were dozens of them. System architecture diagrams, error logs, firmware updates, testing protocols. Most of it looked familiar, but some of it had been modified since he left. New layers added on top of the original framework. Patches built on patches. He could already see the problem. The engineers who'd taken over after he left didn't fully understand the gateway's core logic. They'd treated it like a black box, adding features without comprehending how the underlying system actually worked. And every time they added something new, they introduced another potential failure point. Lucas opened one of the error logs and started tracing the cascade. Temperature drop, humidity spike, voltage fluctuation. The gateway tried to compensate, ran into a memory allocation conflict, looped back, tried again, looped again, and crashed. It was exactly what he'd warned them about 6 years ago. Dad? Lucas looked up. Sophie was staring at him, her backpack already on. Time for school, she said. He glanced at the clock. 8:55. Right, let's go. They drove to the elementary school in silence. Sophie didn't talk much in the mornings. She never had. Lucas pulled into the drop-off lane and waited while she unbuckled her seatbelt. You okay? He asked. Sophie nodded. You sure? Yeah. If you need me today, call the office. They'll get me. I know. She climbed out of the truck, slung her backpack over one shoulder, and walked toward this building without looking back. Lucas watched until she disappeared through the doors. Then he drove home and got to work. By noon, he'd identified 17 separate points of failure in the gateway protocol. Most of them were minor, the kind of thing that would cause a warning light but not a total system crash. But 3 of them were critical, and all 3 of them traced back to the same root cause, a memory leak in the error handling subroutine. Lucas pulled up a blank document and started writing. He worked quickly, laying out the technical details in plain language. What the flaw was, how it happened, why it was dangerous, and most importantly, how to fix it. The fix itself wasn't complicated. It required rewriting a section of the gateway's firmware and pushing an over-the-air update to every affected vehicle. The hard part was doing it without causing a panic. If Vaughn Automotive issued a recall, the media would have a field day. Billionaire CEO's cars fail in the rain. Thousands of vehicles at risk. The stock price would tank. The acquisition would fall apart. and Elena would probably lose her job. But if they didn't issue a recall and someone got hurt, the lawsuits would be catastrophic. Lucas finished the report and sent it to Elena. Then he sat back and waited. The response came 10 minutes later. "This is worse than I thought." Lucas typed back, "Yeah, can you build the fix?" "Yes. But deploying it is going to be a nightmare. Why? Because you're going to have to admit there's a problem. And if you do that before the acquisition closes, the deal's dead." There was a long pause before Elena responded. "Let me worry about the deal. You focus on the fix." Lucas stared at the message. She was either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid, maybe both. He typed back, "When do you need it? How long will it take? To write the patch? A week? Maybe 2? To test it? Another month? We don't have a month." "Then you're taking a risk." "I know." Lucas exhaled slowly. "All right, I'll start working on it. Thank you." He closed the laptop and rubbed his eyes. This was exactly the kind of thing he'd walked away from 6 years ago. The impossible deadlines, the corporate pressure, the constant sense that one mistake could destroy everything. But Sophie was at school. The house was quiet. And for the first time in a long time, Lucas felt like he was doing something that mattered. He opened the laptop again and got to work. Over the next 3 days, Lucas rebuilt the gateway's error handling protocol from the ground up. He worked late into the night, testing and retesting every line of code, making sure the patch wouldn't introduce new problems while fixing the old ones. Elena called him every morning at 8. Sometimes they talked for 5 minutes, sometimes for an hour. She asked questions. He answered them. She pushed back when she didn't understand something. He explained it a different way. It was strange working with someone who actually listened. Most of the executives he dealt with years ago didn't care about the technical details. They just wanted results. But Elena was different. She wanted to understand how everything worked, why the flaw existed, what the risks were, how the fix would be deployed. She wasn't just managing the problem. She was trying to solve it. On the 4th day, Lucas sent her the first version of the patch. Elena called him 20 minutes later. "I need you to walk me through this," she said without preamble. Lucas pulled up the code on his screen. "What part?" "All of it." So he did. He explained how the patch intercepted the memory leak before it could cascade, how it rerouted error handling to a backup subroutine, how it logged failures without crashing the system. Elena asked smart questions, hard questions, questions that made Lucas realize she'd been doing her homework. "What happens if the patch fails?" she asked. "It won't. But if it does? Then the car reverts to the original firmware and you're back where you started. And the driver gets a warning light, but the car keeps running. That's better than a total shutdown." "Yeah." Elena was quiet for a moment. "How confident are you in this?" Lucas hesitated. He wanted to say 100%, but that wasn't true. No software was perfect. There were always edge cases, always variables you couldn't predict. 90%, he said finally. "That's not good enough. It's the best I can do without a full testing cycle." "Then we test it." "How? You don't have time to run a full QA process." "No, but I can run a limited field test. Install the patch on 100 vehicles, monitor them for a week, see what happens." Lucas thought about it. "That could work?" Lucas thought, "But you'll need to pick vehicles in cold, humid climates. Otherwise, you won't trigger the flaw." "I'll have my team pull a list, and you'll need to monitor them in real time. If something goes wrong, you need to know immediately." "I can set that up." Lucas leaned back in his chair. "You're really going to do this?" "Yes. Even if it kills the acquisition." "Even if?" Lucas didn't know what to say to that. He'd spent 6 years watching companies choose profit over safety, watching executives bury problems instead of fixing them. And here was Elena, risking everything to do the right thing. It didn't make sense. "Why?" he asked. "Why what? Why are you doing this? You could ignore the problem, push the acquisition through, make your $1 billion and walk away. No one would ever know." Elena was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was quieter than he'd ever heard it. "Because I'd know," she said. Lucas didn't respond. "I spent my whole life building this company," Elena continued. "I sacrificed everything for it. My relationships, my health, my sanity. And I told myself it was worth it because I was creating something important, something that mattered." She paused. But if I let this slide, then none of it matters. I'm just another CEO who put money over people, and I can't live with that. Lucas stared at the wall, her words settling over him like weight. All right, he said finally. Let's fix it, right? The field test started 3 days later. Elena's team identified 100 vehicles in cold weather regions and remotely installed the patch. Then they monitored the data, watching for any sign of failure. Lucas didn't sleep much during that week. He kept his laptop open next to the bed, checking the logs every few hours, looking for anomalies. Sophie noticed. You look tired, she said one morning over breakfast. I'm fine. You're not fine. You look like you did when Mom was sick. Lucas set down his coffee. I'm not sick, Sophie. I know, but you're worried about something. He didn't know how to answer that. Sophie was too young to understand what he was dealing with, too young to carry that kind of weight. It's just work, he said. Is it important? Yeah. Sophie studied him for a moment, then nodded. Okay. She didn't ask anything else. By the end of the week, the results were in. Out of 100 vehicles, 97 had run the patch without issue. 2 had triggered minor warning lights that resolved themselves. 1 had experienced a temporary sensor failure unrelated to the gateway. No crashes, no shutdowns, no failures. Lucas sent the data to Elena. She called him 10 minutes later. It works, she said, and he could hear the relief in her voice. Yeah. So what's next? You deploy it to all 9,000 vehicles, and you do it quietly. How? Over-the-air update. Make it look like a routine firmware patch. Don't mention the flaw. Don't issue a recall. Just push the fix and move on. Elena hesitated. That feels like hiding the problem. It's not hiding it. It's fixing it without causing unnecessary panic. What if someone asks why we're pushing an update? Tell them it's a performance enhancement, which is technically true. What? Elena sighed. I hate this. I know, but it's the right move. She didn't argue. The deployment started the next day. Lucas monitored the rollout from his kitchen table, watching as the patch propagated across the network. Vehicle by vehicle, system by system, it was slow, careful, methodical, and it worked. By the end of the second week, all 9,000 vehicles had been updated. The flaw was gone. The cars were safe. Lucas closed his laptop and allowed himself to breathe. It was done. But Elena wasn't finished. I need to find the original report, she said during their next call. Lucas frowned. Why? The problem's fixed. Because I need to know what happened to it, who saw it, who ignored it, and why. Does it matter? Yes. If someone buried that report, they put thousands of people at risk. I need to know who. Lucas understood. This wasn't just about fixing the flaw. It was about accountability. Good luck, he said. Like I told you, half the records from that era are gone. I'll find it. And she did. It took Elena 3 days of digging through archived servers and old backup files, but she finally found it. Lucas's original report, dated 6 years ago, filed through the internal safety review system. It had been flagged as high priority, and then it had been closed without action. The person who closed it was Daniel Marsh, the VP of engineering at the time. He'd reviewed the report, noted that the flaw was rare and unlikely to cause widespread issues, and marked it as low risk. Then he'd moved on. Elena stared at the screen, her stomach turning. Daniel Marsh was still with the company. He was now Chief Technology Officer. He sat 2 doors down from her office, and he'd known about the flaw for 6 years. She picked up her phone and called Lucas. I found it, she said when he answered. And? It was closed by the CTO. He reviewed it and decided it wasn't worth fixing. Lucas was quiet for a moment. What are you going to do? I don't know. You could fire him. I could, but that won't change what happened. No, but it'll send a message. Elena leaned back in her chair, staring at the ceiling. He's been with the company for 15 years. If I fire him now, 2 weeks before the acquisition closes, it'll raise questions. So you're going to let it slide? I didn't say that. Then what are you saying? Elena closed her eyes. I'm saying I don't have a good answer. Lucas exhaled slowly. Look, I don't know your CTO. Maybe he made a judgment call. Maybe he didn't understand the risk. But the fact is, he had the information and he chose to ignore it. And that almost got people killed. I know. So what are you going to do about it? Elena didn't respond. You wanted accountability, Lucas said. This is what it looks like. The line went quiet. I'll handle it, Elena said finally. How? I don't know yet, but I will. She hung up before Lucas could respond. The next morning, Elena walked into Daniel Marsh's office and closed the door behind her. He looked up from his desk, surprised. Elena, what's going on? She handed him a printed copy of Lucas's report. I need you to explain this. Daniel glanced at the document and his expression shifted. Recognition, then caution. Where did you get this? Archived server. Took me 3 days to find it. Daniel set the report down. That's from 6 years ago. I know. The flaw was assessed. We determined it was low risk. Low risk? 9,000 vehicles have this flaw, Daniel. It causes total system failure under specific conditions. How is that low risk? Because the conditions are rare. We ran the numbers. The probability of failure was less than 1%. And that was acceptable to you? Daniel's jaw tightened. We were in the middle of a restructuring. We didn't have the resources to chase down every potential edge case. This wasn't an edge case. It was a legitimate safety issue. According to one engineer who was on his way out the door, Elena felt her temper flare. That engineer was right. Maybe. But at the time, we didn't know that. You could have followed up. You could have run more tests. You could have done something. Daniel stood up, his voice rising. I made a call based on the information I had. That's my job. And if you're here to second guess every decision I made 6 years ago, we're going to have a problem. Elena stared at him. We already have a problem. What's that supposed to mean? It means I fixed the flaw. The patch is deployed, every affected vehicle is safe, but you should have done that 6 years ago. Daniel's expression hardened. So what now? You're going to fire me? Elena didn't answer. 2 weeks before the acquisition closes? Daniel continued. You think the board's going to let you do that? I don't care what the board thinks. You should, because if you fire me now, you'll tank this deal, and everything you've built will fall apart. Elena held his gaze. Maybe, but I'll still be able to look at myself in the mirror. Daniel laughed bitterly. You're making a mistake. Maybe. She turned and walked out of his office. An hour later, Daniel Marsh submitted his resignation. Elena stared at the email on her screen, feeling something between relief and regret. She'd forced his hand. She knew that. But she also knew she couldn't keep working with someone who'd ignored a safety issue for 6 years. Her phone buzzed. A text from Lucas. Did you talk to him? Elena typed back. Yeah. He resigned. Good. Is it? You did the right thing. Elena set the phone down and looked out the window. The right thing. She hoped so, but it didn't feel like victory. It just felt heavy. That night, Elena worked late at the office, going through the final documents for the acquisition. The deal was set to close in 10 days. Everything was on track. The lawyers were happy. The board was happy. The investors were happy. But Elena couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to go wrong. Her phone rang. Lucas. Hey, she said. We have a problem. Elena's stomach dropped. What kind of problem? I've been monitoring the deployed patch. Everything's running smooth, but I just got a call from someone who used to work at Vaughn. Who? Doesn't matter. What matters is that word's getting out. People are asking questions about why we pushed a firmware update, and someone connected it to the gateway flaw. Elena felt her pulse quicken. How? I don't know, but it's spreading. I've seen 3 posts on engineering forums in the last hour. What are they saying? But that Vaughn quietly fixed a safety issue without disclosing it, and that the issue affected thousands of vehicles. Elena closed her eyes. This is going to blow up. Yeah. What do I do? Lucas was quiet for a moment. You get ahead of it. You issue a statement. You admit there was a flaw. You explain that it's been fixed, and you make it clear that no one was hurt. The board will lose their minds. Probably, but it's better than letting the story get away from you. Elena knew he was right. If she didn't control the narrative, someone else would, and that someone wouldn't care about the truth. All right, she said. I'll draft something tonight. Good luck. Lucas? Yeah? Thank you. For everything. He didn't respond right away. When he did, his voice was softer. Just doing my job. No, you're doing more than that. The line went quiet. Get some sleep, Lucas said finally. Tomorrow's going to be rough. He hung up. Elena sat at her desk, staring at the blank document on her screen. Then she started writing. The statement went out at 6 a.m. the next morning. Vaughn Automotive Technologies has identified and resolved a rare software issue affecting approximately 9,000 vehicles. The issue, related to the vehicle gateway system, could cause temporary system shutdowns under specific environmental conditions. A firmware update has been deployed to all affected vehicles at no cost to customers. No injuries or accidents have been reported. We remain committed to the safety and satisfaction of our customers. It was short, honest, direct, and it set off a firestorm. By noon, the story was everywhere. Tech blogs, automotive news sites, Twitter, Reddit. Everyone had an opinion. Some people praised Elena for transparency. Others accused her of hiding the problem. A few demanded a full recall. Several threatened lawsuits. The stock price dropped 8% in the first hour of trading. Elena's assistant buzzed her. The board wants to meet. Now. Elena closed her laptop. Tell them I'll be there in 5 minutes. She walked into the conference room and faced 12 angry board members. What the hell were you thinking? One of them demanded. Elena sat down. I was thinking that honesty was better than a cover-up. Honesty? You just destroyed our credibility 2 weeks before the biggest deal in company history. I fixed a safety issue that should have been addressed 6 years ago, without consulting us, because I knew you'd tell me not to. The room erupted, voices overlapping, accusations flying. Elena sat quietly, letting them vent. Finally, the chairman held up a hand. Enough. The room fell silent. He looked at Elena. What's done is done. The question now is how we move forward. Can this deal still close? Elena met his gaze. I don't know. That depends on the acquiring company. Have they reached out? No, not yet. Then we wait and pray they don't walk away. The meeting ended. Elena walked back to her office, her chest tight. She'd gambled everything on transparency. And now she'd find out if it was enough. The call from the acquiring company came 3 days later. Elena was in her office, staring at spreadsheets she couldn't focus on when her assistant buzzed through. Richard Chen from Apex Holdings on line 1. Elena's heart stopped. Richard Chen was the CEO of Apex, the company buying Vaughn Automotive. If he was calling personally, it meant one of two things. The deal was dead, or he wanted answers. She picked up the phone. Richard? Elena. His voice was calm, measured, impossible to read. We need to talk about your statement. I figured. My board is concerned. They're saying you should have disclosed this issue during due diligence. Elena took a breath. The issue was identified and fixed after due diligence concluded. We deployed the patch as soon as we had a working solution. That's not how it looks from the outside. I know, but it's the truth. Richard was quiet for a moment. Walk me through it. From the beginning. I want to know exactly what happened. So Elena told him. She explained how her car had broken down on Route 9, how Lucas Bennett had stopped to help, how he'd identified the flaw and traced it back to a buried report from 6 years ago, how they'd worked together to build and deploy a fix, how she'd confronted the CTO who'd ignored the original warning, and how she'd chosen transparency over silence, even knowing it could destroy the deal. When she finished, Richard didn't respond right away. You're telling me, he said finally, that you found a critical safety flaw 2 weeks before the acquisition, fixed it without consulting your board, forced your CTO to resign, and then went public with the whole thing. Yes, that's either incredibly brave or incredibly reckless. Probably both. Richard laughed and Elena felt a flicker of hope. My board thinks you're insane, he said. They want me to walk away from this deal. Elena's chest tightened. And what do you think? I think you did the right thing. She blinked. What? You could have buried this, hidden it until after the deal closed, made it someone else's problem. But you didn't. You fixed it. And you owned it. That tells me more about your integrity than any due diligence report ever could. Bexpol. Elena didn't know what to say. The deal's still on, Richard continued. But I need something from you. What? I want to meet the engineer who found the flaw. Lucas Bennett. If he's as good as you say he is, I want him on our team when this acquisition closes. Elena hesitated. Lucas doesn't want to be involved. He's made that very clear. Then convince him. Because if we're buying a company with software this complex, I need someone who actually understands it. And it sounds like he's the only one who does. I'll ask, but I'm not making any promises. Fair enough. Set up a meeting. Let's see if we can make this work. Richard hung up. Elena sat there for a long moment, relief and anxiety warring in her chest. The deal was alive. That was good. But now she had to convince Lucas to do the one thing he'd spent 6 years avoiding. She picked up her phone and called him. Lucas answered on the third ring. Yeah? The acquiring company wants to meet you. Silence. Lucas? No. You don't even know what they want. I don't care. I'm not getting dragged into corporate meetings. It's not a corporate meeting. It's a conversation. Richard Chen wants to understand the system. He wants to know who fixed the flaw. He can read my report. That's not good enough for him. Then he doesn't get the deal. Elena rubbed her temples. Lucas, this meeting could save the acquisition. That's not my problem. Mal iska I. Yes, it is. You're the reason the flaw got fixed. You're the reason we're not facing a massive recall. And now the acquiring company wants reassurance that the technology is solid. You're the only person who can give them that. Find someone else. There is no one else. You designed the system. You understand it better than anyone. And if you don't show up, they might walk away from the deal. Lucas was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was hard. You're asking me to put myself back in the world I walked away from. The meetings, the corporate pressure, the endless compromises. I left that behind for a reason. I know. Then don't ask me to go back. Elena stared out the window, choosing her words carefully. I'm not asking you to go back. I'm asking you to show up for one meeting, one conversation, and then you're done. You said that before. This is different. How? Because this isn't about fixing a problem. It's about proving that the problem is actually fixed. And the only person who can do that is you. Lucas exhaled slowly. When's the meeting? 2 days? In Manhattan. I can't. Sophie has a field trip. I'm chaperoning. Can someone else cover it? No. Elena thought fast. What if we reschedule? Push it to next week? I'm not promising anything. Just think about it, please. Lucas didn't respond. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important, Elena said quietly. I know. The line went dead. Elena set the phone down and closed her eyes. She'd pushed him too hard. She knew that. But she didn't have a choice. If Lucas didn't show up, the deal could fall apart. And if the deal fell apart, everything she'd risked would be for nothing. Her phone buzzed. A text from Lucas. Next Wednesday. 2 p.m. One meeting. Then I'm out. Elena felt the tension in her shoulders ease. Thank you. No response. She pulled up her calendar and started rearranging her week. The next few days blurred together. Elena dealt with angry investors, skeptical journalists, and a board that was split down the middle on whether she'd saved the company or destroyed it. The stock price stabilized, but the damage was done. Confidence in Vaughn Automotive had taken a hit, and it would take months to rebuild. Meanwhile, Lucas stayed in Albany, working remotely, monitoring the deployed patch for any signs of failure. He sent Elena daily updates, short, clinical reports with no personal commentary. The patch was holding, no crashes, no shutdowns. The fix was working, but Elena could feel the distance between them growing. She'd pushed him into something he didn't want, and he wasn't the kind of person who forgave easily. On Tuesday night, the day before the meeting, Elena called him. Hey, she said when he answered. Hey, you still good for tomorrow? Yeah. Where do you want to meet? Wherever, I don't care. Elena frowned. He sounded exhausted. You okay? I'm fine. You don't sound fine. Lucas was quiet for a moment. It's been a long week. Sophie doing all right? She's fine, just tired. School's been kicking her ass. What's going on? Nothing serious. She's just struggling with math, and I'm not great at explaining it. Elena hesitated. You want help? I was pretty good at math back in the day. Lucas laughed, but it didn't sound happy. You're offering to tutor my kid. I'm offering to help if you need it. We're fine. Lucas, I said we're fine. The sharpness in his voice caught her off guard. Elena didn't push. All right, I'll see you tomorrow. Yeah. He hung up. Elena stared at the phone, unease settling in her chest. Something was wrong. She didn't know what, but Lucas was pulling away, and she didn't know how to stop it. Wednesday afternoon, Lucas drove down to Manhattan. He'd left Sophie with a neighbor, a retired teacher who'd agreed to help her with homework. The drive took 3 hours, and Lucas spent most of it trying to figure out what he was going to say. He didn't want to be here, didn't want to sit in a boardroom with executives who saw him as a tool to close a deal. But he'd made a promise, and he kept his promises. The meeting was scheduled for 2 o'clock at Apex Holdings headquarters, a glass tower in Midtown. Lucas parked in a nearby garage, checked his reflection in the truck's mirror, and realized he looked exactly like what he was, a guy who didn't belong here. He'd worn the nicest clothes he owned, jeans without holes, a button-down shirt, a jacket that was too big in the shoulders but didn't have any stains. It wasn't boardroom material, but it was the best he could do. He walked into the building and gave his name to the receptionist. She made a call, then handed him a visitor's badge. 32nd floor. They're expecting you. Monsieur, Lucas took the elevator up, his stomach tight. The doors opened onto a sleek hallway with frosted glass walls and minimalist furniture. Everything looked expensive. Everything looked cold. Elena was waiting by the elevator. She looked different than she had on the roadside. Put together, professional. The kind of person who belonged in a place like this. Hey, she said. Hey, thanks for coming. Lucas shrugged. You didn't leave me much choice. Elena's expression flickered, but she didn't argue. Richard's in the conference room. He brought his CTO and a couple of engineers. They want to understand the system architecture and ask some questions about the fix. Fine. Lucas, let's just get this over with. What? Elena led him down the hall and into a large conference room. 3 men were seated at the table. Richard Chen, mid-50s, sharp suit, easy smile. His CTO, younger, late 30s, wearing a polo shirt and an expensive watch. And an engineer Lucas didn't recognize, scribbling notes on a tablet. Richard stood and extended his hand. Lucas Bennett, thanks for making the trip. Oh, Lucas shook his hand. Sure. This is David Park, my CTO, and Brian Wu, one of our lead systems engineers. Quote. More handshakes, more pleasantries. Lucas sat down across from them, and Elena took the seat beside him. Richard got straight to it. Elena tells me you designed the original gateway protocol. Part of it, there was a team, but you were the lead architect. For some of it, yeah. And you identified the flaw that caused the system shutdowns. Yeah, but Richard leaned forward. Walk me through it. I want to understand what went wrong and how you fixed it. Lucas pulled up the technical diagrams on his phone and started explaining. He kept it simple at first, outlining the gateway's core function and how the memory leak triggered the cascade failure. But David, the CTO, kept interrupting with detailed questions. How did the error-handling subroutine allocate memory? What was the buffer size? How did the patch intercept the leak without introducing latency? Lucas answered each question, his irritation growing. These weren't clarifying questions. They were tests. David was trying to figure out if Lucas actually knew what he was talking about or if he was just bluffing his way through. After 20 minutes, Brian, the engineer, jumped in. The patch you deployed, did you run regression testing? Limited testing. We didn't have time for a full cycle. So you deployed untested code to 9,000 vehicles. Lucas's jaw tightened. The code was tested, just not in a lab environment. That's a huge risk. It was a calculated risk. The alternative was doing nothing and letting people get stranded. Or you could have issued a recall and tanked the company's reputation 2 weeks before a billion-dollar acquisition? Yeah, great plan. Brian's expression hardened. I'm just saying, there are protocols for this kind of thing. Pushing an untested patch is... The patch worked, Lucas cut in. No failures, no crashes, no injuries. So maybe instead of questioning my process, you should be asking why the original flaw was ignored for 6 years. The room went silent. Richard raised a hand. Let's take a step back. Lucas, no one's questioning your competence. We just want to make sure we understand the risks. The risks are gone. The patch is deployed. The system is stable. What else do you need? We need to know that the underlying architecture is sound, that there aren't other hidden flaws waiting to surface. Lucas leaned back in his chair. There are always hidden flaws. That's the nature of software. You write code, you test it, you deploy it, and then you find the edge cases you didn't anticipate. The question isn't whether there are more flaws. The question is whether you have people who can find and fix them. And do we? Richard asked. Lucas glanced at Elena. She was watching him, her expression unreadable. That depends, Lucas said. Do you plan to gut the engineering team after the acquisition closes? Because if you do, then no. You don't have the people, but if you keep the folks who actually understand the system, then yeah, you'll be fine. David leaned forward. And what about you? Would you stay on as a consultant? Lucas shook his head. No. Why not? Because I don't work in this industry anymore, Sat. But you clearly still understand the technology. Understanding it and wanting to be involved are two different things. Richard studied him. Elena said you walked away 6 years ago. Why? Lucas hesitated. He didn't owe these people an explanation, but Elena was watching him, and something in her expression made him answer. My wife died, he said quietly, and I had a daughter to raise. The corporate world doesn't leave room for that. So I left. The room went quiet. I'm sorry, Richard said. That must have been hard. Lucas didn't respond. But the fact is, Richard continued, you're one of the few people who truly understands this system. And if we're going to move forward with this acquisition, I need to know that the technology is solid. Can you give me that assurance? Lucas met his gaze. The gateway's fixed. The patch is stable. And the team Elena has in place knows what they're doing. If you treat them right and give them the resources they need, they'll keep the system running. But if you come in and start cutting corners to save money, then yeah, you're going to have problems. That's on you, not the technology. Richard nodded slowly. Fair enough. He glanced at David and Brian, then back at Lucas. Thank you for your time. You've given us a lot to think about. Lucas stood. We done here? Yeah, we're done. Lucas walked out without saying goodbye. Elena caught up with him in the hallway. Lucas, wait. He stopped but didn't turn around. That was rough, she said. I'm sorry. I didn't know they were going to grill you like that. It's fine. It's not fine. They were out of line. Lucas turned to face her. You got what you needed. They asked their questions. I answered. The deal's still on track. We're good. Are we? He frowned. What's that supposed to mean? Elena hesitated. It means I feel like I'm losing you. Every time we talk, you're more distant, and I don't know how to fix that. Lucas stared at her, caught off guard. You're not losing me. I'm just doing what you asked, fixing the problem, showing up for the meeting. That's it. Is it? Yeah. Elena looked like she wanted to say more, but she didn't. Instead, she handed him an envelope. This is for you. Lucas opened it. Inside was a check, $50,000. He stared at it. What is this? Payment for your work. The patch? The consulting? All of it. I didn't ask for payment. I know, but you earned it. Lucas handed the envelope back. I don't want your money. Lucas, I helped because it was the right thing to do, not because I wanted to get paid. Wolves, you spent weeks on this. You deserve compensation. I don't want it. Elena's frustration flared. Why are you being so stubborn? Because taking your money makes this transactional, and that's not what this was. Then what was it? Lucas didn't have an answer for that. Elena stared at him, her eyes searching his face. What do you want from me, Lucas? Nothing. I don't want anything. That's not true. Yes, it is. Then why did you help me? Why did you stop on the side of the road? Why did you spend weeks fixing a problem that wasn't your responsibility? If you didn't want anything, you would have just driven past me and never looked back. Lucas felt something twist in his chest. I stopped because you needed help. That's it. No, that's not it. You stopped because somewhere under all that anger and grief, you still care. You care about the work. You care about doing the right thing. And whether you want to admit it or not, you care about me. Lucas took a step back. Don't. Don't what? Don't make this into something it's not. Elena's voice softened. What is it? Then, it's nothing. You had a problem. I helped you fix it. Now it's done. Is it? Lucas didn't answer. Elena reached out, her hand hovering near his arm, but she didn't touch him. I know you've been hurt. I know you lost someone you loved. And I know you built a life away from all this because it was the only way you could survive. But you don't have to keep running. I'm not running. Yes, you are. You've been running for 6 years. And I get it. I really do. But at some point, you have to stop. You have to let yourself be part of something again. Lucas shook his head. I have Sophie. That's enough. Is it? He didn't respond. Elena stepped closer. You deserve more than just surviving, Lucas. You deserve to live. And I think deep down, you know that. Lucas looked at her, something raw and unguarded flickering in his expression. For a moment, Elena thought he might say something, might let his walls down just enough to let her in. But then he turned away. I need to get back. Sophie's waiting. Elena watched him walk toward the elevator, her chest tight. Lucas, she called after him. He stopped but didn't turn around. Thank you, she said quietly, for everything. He nodded once, then stepped into the elevator and disappeared. Elena stood there for a long time, staring at the closed doors. She'd gotten what she needed. The meeting was done. The deal was back on track. Everything was falling into place. But it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like losing something she'd just started to understand. That night, Lucas drove back to Albany in silence. The highway stretched out in front of him, dark and endless, and his mind wouldn't stop replaying the conversation with Elena. She'd been right. He knew that. He had been running from the grief, running from the memories, running from the possibility that he might care about something other than Sophie again. But caring hurt. Caring meant opening himself up to loss, and he'd already lost too much. When he pulled into his driveway, the house was dark except for the porch light. He walked inside and found Sophie asleep on the couch, her math homework spread out on the coffee table. The neighbor had left a note saying Sophie had finished her work and asked to wait up for him, but she'd fallen asleep around 9. Lucas picked her up carefully, carried her to her room, and tucked her into bed. She stirred, her eyes opening just a little. Dad? Yeah, kiddo, I'm here. How was the meeting? It was fine. Did you help them? Yeah, I think so. Sophie closed her eyes again. Good. Lucas watched her for a moment, his chest tight. This was enough. This had to be enough. But as he walked back to the living room and sat down on the couch, staring at the math homework Sophie had struggled through alone, he couldn't shake the feeling that Elena had been right about something else too. He'd been surviving, but he hadn't been living, and he didn't know if he remembered how. The next morning, Elena got the call she'd been waiting for. Richard Chen's voice was warm. We're moving forward with the acquisition. My board signed off this morning. Elena felt the tension she'd been carrying for weeks finally release. That's great news. Your transparency made the difference. We know what we're buying now, and we know who we're working with. Thank you, Richard. That means a lot. There's one condition. Elena's stomach tightened. What? I want Lucas Bennett on retainer as a technical advisor. Not full-time. Just available when we need him. Can you make that happen? Elena thought about Lucas walking away from her in the hallway, the way he'd shut down when she'd pushed too hard. I'll ask, she said, but I can't make any promises. Do your best. He's a valuable asset. I'd hate to lose access to him. They talked logistics for a few more minutes, then hung up. Elena sat at her desk, staring at her phone. She needed to call Lucas, needed to tell him the deal was done and that Apex wanted him involved going forward. But she also needed to apologize for pushing him, for making assumptions, for not respecting the boundaries he'd set. She picked up the phone and dialed his number. It rang 4 times before he answered. Yeah? Hey, It's Elena. I know. The deal closed. Apex signed off this morning. There was a pause. That's good. They want you on retainer. As a technical advisor. No. Lucas, I told you, I'm not getting involved long-term. Set. It wouldn't be long-term, just occasional consulting when they need expertise on the gateway system. Find someone else. Elena closed her eyes. There is no one else. That's not my problem. I know, but Elena, his voice was firm. I helped you because you needed it. The problem's fixed. The deal's done. I'm out. That was the agreement. I know. You're right. I'm sorry. Lucas didn't respond. I pushed too hard, Elena continued. I asked for more than I should have, and I'm sorry for that. Another long pause. It's fine, Lucas said finally. It's not, but I appreciate you saying that. Neither of them spoke for a moment. For what it's worth, Elena said quietly, I meant what I said yesterday. You deserve more than just surviving. Maybe, but that's my choice to make. I know. Lucas exhaled. Take care of yourself, Elena. You too. The line went dead. Elena set the phone down and stared out the window. She'd saved the company, closed the deal, done everything she'd set out to do, but it felt like she'd lost something important along the way, and she didn't know how to get it back. 3 weeks passed. The acquisition finalized on a cold Friday in November. Elena stood in the conference room surrounded by lawyers, board members, and executives from Apex Holdings, watching signatures get scrawled across documents that transferred ownership of everything she'd built. The room smelled like expensive cologne and older money. Everyone was smiling, handshakes all around. Champagne appeared from somewhere. Richard Chen raised his glass. To new partnerships and continued success. Elena raised hers and drank, the bubbles flat on her tongue. She should have felt something. Relief, maybe. Pride. Accomplishment. She was 30 years old and she'd just closed a deal worth nearly $1 billion. Her personal stake alone would set her up for life. But all she felt was empty. The celebration wrapped up around 6. Elena shook more hands, accepted more congratulations, and smiled until her face hurt. Then she escaped to her office, closed the door, and sat in the dark. Her phone had been buzzing all afternoon. Messages from investors, colleagues, old friends she hadn't heard from in years. Everyone wanted to celebrate. Everyone wanted a piece of the victory. She ignored all of them. Instead, she scrolled through her contacts until she found Lucas's number. She stared at it for a long time, her thumb hovering over the call button. She hadn't talked to him since the day the deal closed, hadn't reached out, hadn't pushed. She'd told herself she was respecting his boundaries, giving him space. But the truth was simpler than that. She missed him. Not just his expertise or his help with the gateway flaw. She missed the conversations. The way he cut through corporate nonsense and said exactly what he meant. The way he'd looked at her on that rainy roadside like she was just another person who needed help, not a CEO worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Elena set the phone down without calling. He'd made his choice, and she had to respect that. She grabbed her coat and left the office, walking out into the cold November night. The city was loud and bright and full of people who had places to be. Elena walked among them, anonymous and unnoticed, and tried to figure out what came next. Up in Albany, Lucas was having a similar problem. The house was quiet. Sophie was at a sleepover for the first time in months, and Lucas had the place to himself. He should have been relieved. A night without worrying about homework or bedtime routines or whether Sophie was eating enough vegetables. But the silence felt wrong. He'd spent the past 3 weeks trying to go back to normal, picking Sophie up from school, making dinner, helping with homework, doing small repair jobs around town to keep money coming in. It was the same life he'd been living for 6 years, but it didn't fit anymore. Something had shifted. Working with Elena had reminded him of who he used to be. Not the grief-stricken widower trying to hold his life together. Not the guy who'd walked away from everything to raise his daughter alone, but the engineer who loved solving impossible problems. The person who understood complex systems and knew how to fix them. He missed that version of himself. Lucas opened his laptop and pulled up the Vaughn automotive documentation Elena had sent him weeks ago. He'd kept it, told himself it was just in case something went wrong with the patch. But he knew that wasn't true. He scrolled through the code, looking for inefficiencies, potential problems, places where the architecture could be improved. It was muscle memory. The same thing he used to do late at night when he worked in the industry. Finding flaws no one else saw. Building solutions no one else thought of. His phone rang. Lucas glanced at the screen. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Yeah? Lucas Bennett? A woman's voice, professional, unfamiliar. Who's asking? My name is Jennifer Zhao. I'm the VP of Engineering at Apex Holdings. Richard Chen gave me your number. Lucas's jaw tightened. I already told them I'm not interested in consulting. I know, but I wanted to reach out personally. I've been reviewing the Gateway Protocol and the patch you developed. It's impressive work. Thanks. I also reviewed the original report you filed 6 years ago, the one that got buried. Lucas didn't respond. You were right, Jennifer continued. The flaw should have been addressed immediately, and the fact that it wasn't is inexcusable. Okay. I'm rebuilding the engineering team from the ground up, bringing in people who actually understand the technology instead of just managing it, and I want you on that team. I already said no. I know, but hear me out. This wouldn't be a traditional role. You'd work remotely, set your own hours, take projects when you want them, turn them down when you don't. No office politics, no mandatory meetings, just you and the code. Lucas leaned back in his chair. Why? Because you're one of the best systems architects I've ever seen, and I don't want to lose access to that. You don't even know me. I know your work. That's enough. Lucas was quiet for a moment. What's the pay? Jennifer named a number that made him blink. That's for part-time consulting? He asked. That's the retainer. Per project fees are separate. Lucas did the math in his head. It was more money than he'd made in the past 3 years combined. Enough to cover Sophie's college fund. Enough to stop worrying about every unexpected bill. I need to think about it, he said. Take your time. But Lucas? Yeah? Elena Vaughn spoke very highly of you. She said you're the kind of person who does the right thing even when it costs you. We need more of that. Jennifer hung up. Lucas set the phone down and stared at the wall. He could say no. Walk away. Keep living the quiet life he'd built. But the offer was good, better than good. And it would give him the flexibility to stay present for Sophie while doing work that actually mattered. He picked up the phone and texted Elena. Did you tell Apex to hire me? The response came fast. No. Jennifer reached out on her own. But I'm glad she did. Why? Because you're wasted fixing cars in Albany. Lucas frowned. I'm not wasted. I'm raising my daughter. You can do both. He stared at the screen, irritation flaring. You don't know what you're talking about. Maybe not, but I know you're scared. I'm not scared. Yes, you are. You're scared that if you let yourself care about something other than Sophie, you'll lose control. But that's not how it works, Lucas. You don't have to choose between being a good father and being who you used to be. Lucas started typing a response, then deleted it. Then typed another one and deleted that too. Finally, he just turned off his phone, but Elena's words stayed with him. 2 days later, Lucas called Jennifer Zhao and accepted the job. The work started small, a few hours a week reviewing code and suggesting improvements. Jennifer sent him projects that didn't require meetings or deadlines, just deep technical analysis and recommendations. It was exactly what Lucas was good at, and he liked it. For the first time in years, he felt like his brain was working the way it used to, sharp, focused, engaged. He had forgotten how good it felt to solve problems that actually challenged him. Sophie noticed. You seem happier, she said one night over dinner. Lucas looked up from his plate. Do I? Yeah, you smile more. I smile. Not like you used to, but now you do again. Lucas set down his fork. Does that bother you? Sophie thought about it. No, I like it. Good. Is it because of the car lady? Lucas blinked. What? The lady you helped, Elena. Is she why you're happier? No, I'm working again, consulting, that's why. Sophie studied him with those two smart eyes. You like her? I don't even know her. You talk to her a lot. We work together. Mom used to say you were bad at lying. Lucas felt something twist in his chest. Sophie almost never mentioned her mother. When she did, it was usually in passing, casual observations that hit harder than she realized. I'm not lying, he said quietly. Sophie shrugged and went back to her dinner. Okay, she dimmed it. But Lucas couldn't shake the conversation. Because Sophie was right. He did talk to Elena more than he needed to. They'd started exchanging messages about work, but the conversations had drifted into other territory. Books they'd read, movies they'd seen, random observations about the world that had nothing to do with gateway protocols or software architecture. It felt easy, natural, like talking to someone who actually understood him, and that scared him more than he wanted to admit. Meanwhile, Elena was dealing with her own problems. The acquisition had gone through, but the aftermath was brutal. Half her executive team had quit or been pushed out during the integration. The company culture was shifting under the weight of new management, and Elena found herself caught between the world she'd built and the world Apex was creating. She hated it. The corporate meetings, the endless restructuring discussions, the careful politics of managing egos and expectations. It all felt hollow. One afternoon, she found herself sitting in a conference room listening to a consultant explain why the engineering team needed to be optimized for efficiency. The man had never written a line of code in his life, but he had charts and graphs and buzzwords that made the Apex executives nod along. Elena wanted to scream. Instead, she excused herself, walked out of the building, and called Lucas. He answered on the second ring. Hey, are you busy? Not really. What's up? Elena stopped walking. She was standing in the middle of a crowded sidewalk, people streaming past her on both sides. I don't know why I called. Lucas was quiet for a moment. Bad day? Something like that. You want to talk about it? Not really. Okay. They sat in silence for a moment, and Elena felt something in her chest ease. Just hearing his voice helped. She didn't know why. How's Sophie was? She asked. She's good. Her math grades are up. That's great. Yeah, she's been working hard. And you? How's the consulting going? It's fine, keeps me busy. Elena smiled. Just fine? All right, it's better than fine. It's actually kind of great. I knew it would be. Lucas laughed. You're annoyingly smug sometimes. I'm a CEO. It comes with the territory. Former CEO. Elena's smile faded. Yeah, former. Lucas caught the shift in her tone. You miss it? I don't know. I miss the parts that mattered. Building something. Solving problems. Making decisions that actually affected people's lives. But the rest of it? The politics and the egos and the endless compromises? I'm fine without that. So what are you going to do? I have no idea. You'll figure it out. How do you know? Because you're annoyingly competent. Elena laughed, and it felt good. Thanks, I think. Any time. They talked for another 20 minutes. About nothing and everything. Work and Sophie and the weather and the stupidity of corporate consultants who'd never built anything in their lives. And when they finally hung up, Elena realized she felt lighter. She didn't know what that meant, but she didn't want to overthink it. Over the next few weeks, the calls became regular. Not every day, but often enough that Elena started looking forward to them. Lucas did too, though he wouldn't have admitted it out loud. They talked about work, about the challenges of integrating Vaughn Automotive into Apex's larger infrastructure, about the projects Jennifer was assigning Lucas, about the ways the original gateway architecture could be improved. But they also talked about other things. Elena told him about growing up in San Francisco, the daughter of immigrants who'd worked brutal hours to give her opportunities they'd never had, how she'd felt the weight of their sacrifices her entire life, how it had driven her to succeed at any cost. Lucas told her about meeting Sarah in college, how they'd been broke and happy and convinced they could build a life together, how her death had broken something in him that he wasn't sure would ever fully heal. The conversations were honest in ways that surprised them both. Neither of them was used to letting their guard down, but somehow talking to each other felt safe. One night in early December, Elena was working late at her apartment when her phone rang. Lucas. Hey, she said, picking up. Hey, you busy? Just drowning in paperwork. Why? I need advice. Elena set down her pen. About what? Sophie's teacher wants to put her in the gifted program, advanced math and science, but it means longer school days and more pressure. And you're not sure if it's the right move. Yeah, she's already stressed. I don't want to make it worse. Elena thought about it. What does Sophie want? She says she wants to do it, but I don't know if she's saying that because she actually wants it or because she thinks I want her to. Have you asked her? Yeah. She insists she's sure. Then trust her. She's smart enough to know what she can handle. Lucas was quiet for a moment. What if I'm pushing her too hard? Are you? I don't know. Maybe. I want her to have opportunities I didn't have, but I also don't want her to burn out before she's 10. Elena heard the fear in his voice, the same fear every parent carried, the terror of making the wrong choice and damaging the person you loved most. You're a good dad, Lucas, she said quietly. Whatever you decide, it'll be because you're thinking about what's best for her. That's all you can do. That doesn't feel like enough. It never does, but it's more than most people give. Lucas exhaled slowly. Thanks. Any time. They talked for another hour, about parenting and pressure and the impossible task of raising a kid in a world that demanded perfection. And when they finally hung up, Lucas realized something had shifted. He wasn't just talking to Elena about work anymore. He was talking to her about his life, his fears, his hopes for Sophie. He was letting her in, and that terrified him. The week before Christmas, Elena made a decision. She was done with Apex, done with the corporate restructuring and the empty meetings and the slow erosion of everything she'd built. She'd fulfilled her contractual obligations. She'd stayed on through the transition, but she didn't owe them anything more. She walked into Richard Chen's office and handed him her resignation. Richard looked surprised. You're leaving? Yeah. Why? I thought the integration was going well. Yeah. It is, but I'm not needed here anymore. You've got a strong team, the technology's solid, and I'm just taking up space. Richard leaned back in his chair. What are you going to do? I don't know yet, but I'll figure it out. Elena, if this is about the consultant we brought in, it's not. This is about me. I built Vaughn because I wanted to create something that mattered. But now it's yours, and I need to figure out what comes next. But, yes. Richard studied her for a long moment. You're going to be okay. I know. They shook hands, and Elena walked out of the building feeling lighter than she had in months. She didn't have a plan, didn't have a new company or a new project or a new goal, but for the first time in her life, that didn't scare her. She pulled out her phone and called Lucas. He answered immediately. Hey. I quit. There was a pause. What? I resigned from Apex, just walked out of Richard's office. Are you serious? Yeah. Why? Elena smiled. Because I was miserable, and life's too short to be miserable. Lucas laughed. That's the least CEO thing I've ever heard you say. I'm not a CEO anymore, I'm just Elena. Just Elena, huh? Yeah, and it feels pretty good. They talked for a while longer, and when they hung up, Elena felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. The holidays came and went. Elena spent Christmas alone in her apartment, which should have been depressing, but somehow wasn't. She ordered takeout, watched old movies, and let herself be still for the first time in forever. Lucas spent Christmas with Sophie, watching her tear through presents and laugh at the terrible jokes and the crackers they pulled. She was happy, healthy, thriving, and that was enough. But late that night, after Sophie had gone to bed, Lucas pulled out his phone and texted Elena. Merry Christmas. The response came a minute later. Merry Christmas. How was your day? Good. Sophie's happy. That's all that matters. You're a good dad. You've said that before. Because it's true. Lucas stared at the screen, trying to figure out what to say next. There were things he wanted to tell her, things he'd been thinking about for weeks, but the words felt too big, too complicated. So instead, he just typed, thanks for everything. For what? For pushing me. For reminding me who I used to be. For not giving up when I tried to walk away. There was a long pause before Elena responded. You did the same for me. Lucas didn't know how to answer that, so he just sent, Good night, Elena. Good night, Lucas. He set the phone down and sat in the dark, staring at nothing. Something had changed between them. Something neither of them had planned or expected. And Lucas didn't know what to do about it. Because caring about someone meant risking loss. And he'd already lost too much. But as he sat there in the silence of his small house, He realized something else. Maybe Elena had been right. Maybe surviving wasn't enough anymore. Maybe it was time to start living again. New Year's Eve arrived cold and clear. Elena spent it alone, watching the city lights from her apartment window. She'd turned down half a dozen invitations to parties and galas. Everyone wanted the newly minted multimillionaire at their event, but she didn't want any of it. Instead, she opened her laptop and started writing. Not a business plan or a strategy document, just thoughts, ideas, things she'd been too busy to think about for years. What if she built something smaller this time? Something that actually helped people instead of just making money. Something that mattered. She didn't have answers yet, but she had time to figure it out. At 11:58, her phone rang. Lucas. "Hey," she said, surprised. "Hey, you busy?" "Just watching the clock. You?" "Same. Sophie's asleep." "I'm sitting here like an idiot waiting for midnight." Elena smiled. "We're both idiots then." "Yeah." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to each other breathe. "Elena," Lucas said quietly. "Yeah?" "I've been thinking." "About what?" "About you and me and whatever this is." Elena's heart started beating faster. "Okay." "I don't know what I'm doing," Lucas continued. "I haven't done this in a long time, and I'm probably going to screw it up. But I think," he paused, "I think I'd like to see you, in person. Not for work, just to see you." Elena felt something warm spread through her chest. "I'd like that too." "Yeah?" "Yeah." Outside, fireworks started going off. The city erupted in noise and light. A new year, a new beginning. "Happy New Year, Elena," Lucas said. "Happy New Year, Lucas." And for the first time in a long time, both of them believed it might actually be. They met on a Saturday in mid-January at a diner halfway between Albany and Manhattan. Neutral ground. No pressure, just coffee and conversation. Elena arrived first. She'd driven up that morning, the highway empty and quiet under a gray winter sky. She sat in a booth by the window, watching the parking lot, her hands wrapped around a mug that had gone cold. She was nervous. Actually, nervous. It had been years since she'd felt this way about anything that wasn't a board meeting or an investor pitch. But this was different. This mattered in a way she didn't fully understand yet. Lucas's truck pulled into the parking lot at exactly 11 o'clock. Elena watched him climb out, saw him pause for a moment like he was gathering himself, then walk toward the diner. He looked the same as he had that night on Route 9. Jeans, worn jacket, dark hair that needed a cut. But there was something different in the way he carried himself. Less guarded, maybe, or just less tired. He spotted her through the window and raised a hand. Elena waved back. When he walked through the door, she stood up without thinking. They faced each other across the booth, neither of them sure what to do next. "Hey," Lucas said. "Hey, you look good." Elena smiled. "So do you." "I look like I always look." "I know." Lucas laughed and the tension broke. He slid into the booth across from her, and a waitress appeared with coffee. They ordered food neither of them was hungry for, then sat there staring at each other like teenagers on a first date. "This is weird," Lucas said finally. "Yeah. We've talked on the phone for weeks, but sitting here feels different." "I know what you mean." Lucas picked up his coffee, set it down without drinking. "So, you quit Apex." "I did." "Any regrets?" "Not yet. Ask me again in 6 months when I'm bored out of my mind." "You won't be bored." "How do you know?" "Because you're not built that way. You'll find something new to obsess over. It's what you do." Elena raised an eyebrow. "You think you know me that well?" "I think I'm starting to." She didn't know how to respond to that, so she changed the subject. "How's Sophie?" "She's good. Started the gifted program. Already complaining about the homework." "But she's happy?" "Yeah, I think so." "That's all that matters." Lucas nodded. "She asked about you, actually." "She did?" "Yeah. Wanted to know if you were coming to visit." Elena felt something warm settle in her chest. "What did you tell her?" "That I'd ask." "And?" Lucas met her eyes. "So I'm asking." Elena held his gaze. "I'd like that." "Yeah?" "Yeah." The food arrived. They picked at it, talking around the things they actually wanted to say. About the weather, about the diner's terrible coffee, about the highway traffic on the drive up. Finally, Elena set down her fork. Can I ask you something? Sure. Why did you really stop that night on Route 9? You could have just driven past me. Lucas was quiet for a moment. You want the honest answer? Yeah, I almost did. I saw your car on the side of the road, and I thought about keeping going. I had Sophie with me. It was late, and stopping for strangers is usually a bad idea. So what changed your mind? Lucas looked out the window. I don't know. Maybe it was the way you were standing there in the rain, like you were trying to hold it together but barely managing. Or maybe it was just that I knew what it felt like to be stuck somewhere with no way out. He turned back to her. Either way, I stopped, and I'm glad I did. Elena felt her throat tighten. Me too. They sat in silence for a moment. What about you? Lucas asked. Why did you push so hard to fix the flaw? You could have buried it. No one would have known. I would have known. Is that enough? Elena thought about it. It has to be. Elena. Because if I can't trust myself to do the right thing when no one's watching, then what's the point of any of it? Lucas studied her. You really believe that? Yeah, I do. Even when it costs you? Especially then. Lucas shook his head slowly. You're kind of terrifying, you know that? Elena laughed. I've been called worse. They talked for another hour, about work and life and the strange paths that had brought them to this moment. And when the check came, Lucas reached for it before Elena could. I've got it, he said. You don't have to. I know, but I want to. Elena didn't argue. They walked out into the cold January air, the wind cutting through their jackets. Lucas's truck was parked next to Elena's car, and they stood between the two vehicles, neither of them ready to leave. So, Lucas said, what now? Elena looked at him. I don't know. What do you want? Honestly, I have no idea. I haven't done this in a long time. Neither have I. So we're both making it up as we go. Looks like it. Lucas smiled. That's terrifying. Yeah, but also kind of exciting. He stepped closer. Not much. Just enough that Elena could feel the warmth coming off him despite the cold. Can I see you again? Yes. When? Whenever you want. Lucas reached out and took her hand. His fingers were rough and warm, and Elena felt something settle into place inside her chest. I'm going to screw this up, he said quietly. I'm out of practice. I've got a kid. I'm a mess most days, and I don't know how to do this without overthinking everything. Good thing I'm a mess too, then. Lucas laughed. Yeah, good thing. He let go of her hand, and Elena immediately missed the contact. But he was still standing close, and that was enough for now. Drive safe, he said. You too. Elena climbed into her car and watched Lucas drive away. Then she sat there for a long time, her hands on the steering wheel, trying to process what had just happened. She'd spent her entire adult life building walls, keeping people at arm's length, telling herself that success meant not needing anyone. And in one conversation, Lucas had walked right through all of it like the walls weren't even there. She didn't know if that was terrifying or the best thing that had ever happened to her. Maybe both. Over the next few weeks, they fell into a rhythm. Lucas would drive down to the city on weekends when Sophie was with her friend's family. Elena would drive up to Albany when Lucas couldn't get away. They'd meet at diners, walk through parks, sit in coffee shops, and talk about everything and nothing. It was slow, careful. Neither of them pushed for more than the other was ready to give. But it was real in a way nothing else in Elena's life had been for a long time. One Saturday in February, Elena drove up to Albany, and Lucas took her to Sophie's school play. Sophie was playing a tree in some adaptation of a fairy tale Elena didn't recognize. She had exactly 3 lines and forgot one of them, but she smiled the entire time. Afterward, they went out for pizza. Sophie sat between them in the booth, talking nonstop about the play and her classmates, and the fact that her teacher had complimented her science project. Elena listened, asking questions when it seemed right, and trying not to notice the way Lucas kept glancing at her like he was checking to make sure she was still there. When they dropped Sophie off at her friend's house for a sleepover, Lucas turned to Elena in the truck. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For coming. For sitting through a terrible school play. For acting like you actually cared." Elena frowned. "I did care." "I know, that's what scares me." "Why?" Lucas gripped the steering wheel. "Because Sophie likes you. And if this thing between us doesn't work out, it's not just me who gets hurt." Elena understood. This wasn't just about them anymore. It was about a little girl who'd already lost too much. And Lucas was terrified of adding to that. "I'm not going anywhere," Elena said quietly. "You can't promise that." "No, but I can promise I'll try. That's all anyone can do." Lucas looked at her for a long moment. Then he leaned over and kissed her. It was brief, tentative, like he was testing whether it was allowed. But when he pulled back, Elena saw something in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Hope. They started spending more time together. Real time. Not just careful coffee dates and awkward conversations. Lucas showed Elena his house, the small workshop where he fixed things, the bookshelf full of engineering texts he hadn't opened in years. Elena showed him her apartment, the ridiculous view she never looked at, the closet full of business clothes she didn't wear anymore. They talked about Sarah, about the cancer that had taken her, and the grief Lucas had carried ever since. Elena didn't try to fix it or make it better. She just listened, and that was enough. Elena told him about her parents, about the weight of their expectations and the fear that she'd never be enough, about the loneliness that came with success and the realization that none of it mattered if you had no one to share it with. Lucas listened the same way she had. No judgment, no easy answers, just presence. One night in March, they were sitting on Elena's couch, the city lights glittering below them, when Lucas said, "I think I'm falling for you." Elena turned to look at him. "You think?" "Okay, I know, I'm falling for you, and it's terrifying." "Why?" "Because I haven't felt this way since Sarah, and I don't know if I'm ready." Elena took his hand. "No one's ever ready. You just decide it's worth the risk." "Is it?" "I think so, but you have to decide that for yourself." Lucas was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "What about you? How do you feel?" Elena smiled. "I think I'm falling for you too, and it's terrifying. But I'm tired of being scared." "Yeah?" "Yeah." Lucas pulled her closer and they sat there in the dark, not saying anything, just being together. And for the first time in years, Elena felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. By April, things had shifted. Lucas was spending more time in the city. Elena was spending more time in Albany. Sophie had stopped asking when Elena was visiting and started asking when she wasn't. It felt like a life. Not perfect, not smooth, but real. One afternoon, Elena was working on a new business plan in Lucas's kitchen while he helped Sophie with her homework at the table. It was domestic and ordinary and everything Elena had never thought she wanted. But sitting there listening to Lucas explain fractions and Sophie complain about how boring math was, Elena realized something. This was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Her phone buzzed. A text from Richard Chen. "Heard you're starting something new. Let me know if you need investors." Elena smiled and typed back, "Thanks. I'll keep that in mind." She set the phone down and looked up to find Lucas watching her. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Yeah, just Richard checking in." "What are you building?" Elena hesitated. She hadn't told anyone yet, hadn't even fully figured it out herself. But looking at Lucas, she knew he'd understand. "I want to build a company that actually helps people," she said. "Not just makes money. Something that solves real problems for real people. Like the gateway flaw. Something that matters." Lucas smiled. "That sounds like you. You think it'll work?" "I think if anyone can make it work, it's you." Sophie looked up from her homework. "Can I help?" Elena laughed. "Maybe when you're older." "I'm good at math now. Dad says so." "She's not lying," Lucas said. "She aced her last test." Elena grinned. "Then I'll definitely keep you in mind." Sophie went back to her homework satisfied. Lucas caught Elena's eye and mouthed, "Thank you." Elena mouthed back, "For what?" "For being here." She didn't need to respond. They both knew what it meant. That night, after Sophie went to bed, Lucas and Elena sat on the porch in the cool spring air. The stars were out, bright and clear, and the world felt quiet in a way the city never did. "I've been thinking," Lucas said. "About what?" "About us. About what this is." Elena's chest tightened. "Okay. I don't want to do this halfway. I spent 6 years just surviving, just getting through each day. But being with you makes me want more than that. I want to actually live again." Elena turned to look at him. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I want this to be real, not just weekend visits and careful conversations. I want you in my life, in Sophie's life, for real." Elena felt tears prick her eyes. "I want that too." "Yeah?" "Yeah." Lucas pulled her close and Elena let herself lean into him. It wasn't perfect. They hadn't solved everything. There were still logistics to figure out, and fears to work through, and 100 small compromises they'd have to make. But they'd figure it out, together. Because that's what people did when they actually cared about each other. They showed up. They tried. They made it work. 6 months later, Elena officially launched her new company. It was smaller than Vaughn Automotive, more focused. The goal was simple: identify critical safety flaws in existing automotive technology and fix them before people got hurt. Lucas signed on as the lead technical advisor. Not full-time. Just enough to stay involved without sacrificing time with Sophie. And it worked. The company didn't make billions. It probably never would, but it mattered, and that was enough. Sophie thrived in the gifted program. Her math grades stayed strong. She made friends. She started asking Elena for help with her science projects. And slowly, carefully, she started calling Elena by her first name instead of the car lady. But then, it felt like progress. One evening in late October, almost exactly a year after Elena's car had died on Route 9, Lucas drove her back to the same spot. It was raining again, cold and gray and miserable. They sat in the truck, staring at the empty roadside. "Why did you want to come here?" Elena asked. Lucas didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was quiet. "Because this is where everything changed, for both of us." Elena looked out at the rain. "You ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't stopped?" "All the time."